Well, good morning, everyone. This is Chris Joslin again, your host for another edition of Jaws Bites, coming to you direct, episode number 60, I believe, to bring you and the community more information about the transportation logistics industry, maybe from a little bit different point of view. Oftentimes we have folks on, or I talk myself about where I see things are headed, where they are now, some of the different things that are going on in the industry, inside and outside, the different view from an international standpoint or a national standpoint or even a California standpoint. Today we have a little bit different viewpoint. I'd like to start trying to get some younger logistics folks on the program to talk a little bit about their perspective on some of the issues that pertain and their challenges they face, where they see things are headed. And generationally, it's unique to bring on younger people that have a different kind of learning behind them, a different kind of background, and are frankly putting in a different kind of effort to move logistics into, a new, I was going to say a new century, but we've been here for a while, but it seems like sometimes some of us older folks are lagging in last century. So today we have a special guest named Justin Lim coming to us from a company called Illumina, very important company in the industry of gene sequencing. A lot of the things in biotech today revolve around a company like that, but as all companies they do, there is a supply chain logistics arm to that that's really important to talk about and discuss. So without further ado, let's welcome the analyst from Illumina Corporation in San Diego, California, Mr. Justin Lim. I can't thank you enough for being on for a few minutes, though. I know it's taken time out of your schedule, and like we said
Chris, of
before I
course.
started recording this, the schedule is kind of all over the place. Sometimes you're at home, sometimes you're at work, sometimes you're
Right.
in meetings. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate you spending a few minutes, because I had this discussion, Justin, with some of my team the other day, and one of my teammates, who happens to be my daughter too, who you've met,
What a
pointed
support,
out
yeah.
that
Yeah.
she's a great support,
She's
but
yeah.
she pointed out that sometimes my perspective is a little old school. And I thought, you know what? I got to start getting some people on the podcast that are of a different generation that look at things a little bit differently. So thank you for getting on with me and spending a few minutes. And frankly, the business you're in, the industry you're in,
hmm
it's people don't generally think about your
hmm
industry as something that
hmm
is really focused in on the supply chain as much as they should. They always talking about the technical aspects and DNA and
Right.
sequencing and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But thank you again. And maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. Just take a couple of seconds and do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, first of all, Chris, thanks for having me here, and I'm glad to be, help here, whatever you're doing in the business. So, yeah, for myself, I've been working, as you know, previously in Samsung for about 8 years, and moved a totally different field from consumer electronics to now I'm working at Illumina, which is focusing on DNA sequencing and pretty much all biotech stuff. So it's definitely different, totally different field. And when I was working at Samsung, as you know, we mainly deal with a lot of truckloads, rails. And now when we're talking about biotech, usually we deal with a lot of temperature sensitive products like cold chain. So we ship a lot with air shipments and, small parcel with the UPS. Usually we try to ship as within 48 hours, for international within 72 hours. So it's totally different. The carriers and the mode of utilization was totally different. So it was kind of very hard to get adopted. But now being here in Illumina for about 3 years now, got myself controlled. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, continuously working here. Yeah.
That's amazing. Between those two places, you've been in the industry for over a decade. I can't
Yeah, I know.
believe that. I can't believe that
That's
means
what
you're
I'm
a
saying,
veteran
Chris.
now.
I'm getting old.
But it's interesting, and I think it's worth pointing out that supply chain is not just about. I mean, we all get pigeonholed, right? At Samsung, you were looking at a certain type of freight, moving dry goods, finished goods primarily, I would imagine, though you probably did some
Right,
raw material stuff as well. And,
right,
and with Illumina, now you've got a couple of different aspects to that. You've got, several different types of machines, that do
right,
sequencing, analyzing of DNA and genomes, et
right,
cetera. But the
right.
cold chain that you mentioned, that kind of surprises me because is Illumina dealing with the actual doing the sequencing and having the DNA sent to them, or is that outsourced? Is that something that I
Yeah,
thought you
good
were just doing
question.
the machines?
Yeah, good question, Chris. So, I mean, Illumina is a biotech. I can share that screen a little later, but yeah, we
Okay.
have sequencers, like which is like you mentioned. If you think about it as printer, right? So we have totally patent printers of genomic sequencing machines, and anything goes in there. For example, I'm giving you example as a printer because the ink or papers that goes into the printer, it's all manufactured by us because it's all 100% patent-based products. So
Hmm.
it's not like you buy ink from outsourcing different stores. Like for us Illumina, anything that goes into the machine we have to manufacture. There's no other
Hmm.
providers to provide that. So we have an instrument business, and also we have a consumable business that goes into like
Hmm.
buffer cartridge or buffer solutions that goes into the machine. um, there's some chip that goes into the machine has to be replaced once in a while. So those are the another huge revenue for us. So
Hmm.
if you look at our revenue yearly is around $4 billion, and about 60% of the revenue is coming from the consumables, like whatever goes into the machine, and 40% is the actual machine selling business. And
Gotcha.
also,
So it's not just the machines itself that you're
right,
selling, it's all the refurbishing, the, as you said, the printer cartridges,
exactly.
so to speak, things like that.
Exactly. And then also we have, a lot of partnership with the various, like biotechs like Moderna, Pfizer, or we have, Roche, which is a, heavily reliant, cancer screening test and stuff like that. So we actually deal with a lot of patient samples. So some of the customers send the patient samples like blood or, like for example, 23andMe, Ancestry, and we actually do some of those type of sequencings with our machine. So we have a patient's sample coming in for the lab service. And then also we have, customers who buying the machines from the hospitals or from a lot of universities utilizing our machines to do generation sequencing. So yeah, many different businesses going on.
Yeah, many different supply chains. And I talk about this a lot of times. People always think of supply chains and they'll think a ship or a truck or something
Mm,
like that. But there's a lot more to
mm-mm.
it than that. Not just the air freight, not just the cold chain kind of supply chain you're talking about, but inbound and outbound, both things as
Right.
small as the 23andMe is a great example, right? They send you a
Hmm.
swab, a little box, a little container, and you
Right.
swab your mouth, you
Exactly.
send it into them, and suddenly of course, there's a lot of
Hmm.
there's a lot of privacy issues people talk about that. We won't get into that today, but
Yeah.
but that's interesting because I thought Illumina was basically let's make the machines and send them out there. But what you're saying is
Mm,
every component, every portion of that machine is something that is proprietary, so that
exactly.
Illumina controls that part of it. And so it's
Yeah.
probably I don't know what kind of competitors are out there for you, but there's probably a real strong drive for market share. And if you've got a
Exactly.
deal with Roche or with Moderna or those guys,
Right.
this industry is exploding. How are you being
Exactly.
able to source all the raw materials needed to create this stuff?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of sourcing partners, like from Singapore, and we have some US-based suppliers, and it's very, well, I would say diversified location. So, yeah, I mean, we're trying to, of course, for us, this cost savings is always the huge issue because nowadays we're spending so much money on just the supply chain and the transportation fee. So we're
Right.
trying to use ocean as much as possible for those materials that coming in for the instruments, making instruments. It's pretty much all raw materials. We're trying to ship from the ocean, but it takes month and month. You know the
Too
port
long.
congestion more than anyone, right? So we
Exactly.
now we have to ship as, air. We're not like, consumer electronic where we build up all at once and then just store it in some place and sells. It's not like that, right? So time sensitivity, depending on how urgency and the factory, demand, we sometimes have to outsource from by air or ocean. There's optimum situation, but it's really depending on the market condition and situation.
Yeah. I would
Yeah.
imagine that holding a lot of raw material inventory is never the goal. Well, it's never the goal for anybody, but with your industry, I would imagine it's even less so, especially if there's
Exactly.
cold sensitive stuff that you have to deal with. So that's real interesting. But I don't know how you, except for large stuff that you need for framing these machines, et cetera. I can't imagine using ocean would be
Ideal for
hardly
it,
ever.
right?
Exactly. I would
Mhm.
imagine planes are the main thing when you talk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And keeping up, but what about keeping up with demand though? Because the industry is exploding, especially over the last couple of years with all the, I mean,
Right.
I was watching something from, I believe it's your CEO is D'Souza, right?
Yeah, Francis
And
D'Souza.
I was watching something from him at the most recent World Economic Forum, how he was talking about, the cost of things. I think he said it was 2007, it was like $150,000 to do a sequence, a normal gene sequence. And right now it's like $600, something along
Exactly.
that. And it's predicted to go down another eightfold or so in the next 5-6 years, something like that.
That's our
And
target. Right.
that is, when it gets to that kind of ubiquity, everybody wants to do it. Everybody wants to know their own genome
Exactly.
sequence, et cetera. And especially the drug companies, because designer drugs, i.e.
Right.
what's happened with Moderna and mRNA and things like that, it's just going to explode. You're going to be busier than ever.
Right. So, as I mentioned, Illumina is, investing a lot of money on partnership, and also we recently acquired this Grail, which is heavily focusing on, cancer screening. So in our future, right, like you mentioned, is very, very bright as biotech. As we use every single genomic sequencing to make, for example, customization in a medicine or drug. For example, your gene, based on your gene, what type of disease are more exposed, or what type of cancer is more vulnerable. Then we create basically customized pill for that. So it's future is very bright, and our investment in variety different biotech, at the partnership to it's very active, right? So
You know what they need to do, Justin? They need to have something where they can do a screening for us follically challenged people, and when we're about 25, so that when
there
I'm
you
this
go.
age, I don't have to deal with this.
Hopefully, right, in 10 years we can have
You
that
would
some type of
think. You
medicine.
would think.
Yeah. I mean, anything is possible, Chris, with
Yeah.
the DNA.
It's
Everything
something
starts
you
with the
don't have to
DNA,
worry about. Something you don't
No,
have to
actually,
worry
I'm losing some hair here, so
about. Yeah. Well,
I'm
you
gonna
stay in
cover it
this
up.
industry long enough, and that's part of the problem.
Right. So,
But
Chris, if you don't mind, I'll quickly share the
please
screen
go right
here
ahead.
with you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, before we kind of go into more detailed discussions, I just want to kind of share here with you on the
Some of the technologies, yeah.
so what type of products we have. Let me see. Let me know if you see my screen real
Oh yeah, I
quick.
got it. Definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Here we go. Yeah, so just briefly, again, we covered this one already, but just kind of give you a little bit heads up on what type of sequencers we have and what
Are
type of
the
sequencers.
sequencers designed for specific types of things, or are they just like
Mhm.
levels of sequencer?
Yeah, to be honest, we have so many different sequencers and they provide different services. But we have from small readings. So basically what I mean by that is, we have numerous genomic DNA for each person, right? And depending on the customer's need, they purchase different type of products. Of course, have a different price range, but mainly focusing on, the length of sequencing read. So for example, iSeq here you see is a very small tool where to do short-term sequencers, and all the way up until NovaSeq 6000 is our biggest and then most expensive product, which can read up to, pretty much unlimited length of the sequencing. So we have a variety different of sequencers, and right now we have a new products coming up in end of this year, and then every year we're trying to come up with new products to show in the market what type of sequencing we can offer, right? So
Yeah,
here
faster,
are
better, bigger. Yeah.
exactly faster runtime, bigger output on the sequencing reading technologies. So these are all the lineups. We mainly have right now 8 of these products we're selling as a instrument sequencers, and we currently own about 80% of a market share on the genomic sequencing market. So it's pretty big market. We are
I would
currently sharing.
imagine that different governmental agencies have interest
Hmm.
in these as well. Maybe that's something
Yeah.
you can't talk about as much, but
Hmm.
certainly, or I've always often wondered, because you hear people talk about all kinds of things with the 23andMe or with Ancestry and all the
Right.
different things that are going on, and the ability for them to quote unquote sell the information. But
Hmm.
here you are, the ones that make the sequencers themselves, and I don't remember where I read it, but I was reading something about um, cloud technology being utilized or coming up on being
Hmm.
utilized for sequenceability as well. Does that mean
Hmm.
someone like AWS buys some of your stuff and then you can do the sequencing from them, or is it where you guys are doing the sequencing and then something is broadcast?
My knowledge on that is, we do our own sequencing, and of course, we have a lot of, database like that. You mentioned AWS or, the cloud-based sequencing type of stuff. I don't exactly know, but
Right, right.
yeah, we, I'm
You
pretty
know,
sure. So I think I actually saw that here, Chris. In the partnership, I saw there's a Amazon AWS, partnership with Illumina. That means we
ah,
have some partnership with Amazon,
well,
those type of stuff.
the interesting thing about that, Justin, is that I get excited about all the technology out there. I'm not a
Hmm.
geek, but I can see how
Hmm.
fast we're moving in certain directions. And
Exactly.
I don't even know if we can see 5 years into the future on stuff like this and know where it's going.
Hmm.
It's stuff that seemed impossible. I think it was only maybe 20 years ago now that they did the first gene sequencing. I mean,
Hmm.
that's not a lot of time. That's really not,
Right.
in terms of change, it's not a lot of time. And yet now we're talking about bringing the price of doing anybody's sequence down to something anybody can afford to do. Amazing.
Exactly.
Oh,
That
so,
that's great. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if you look at the cars, right now they just autopilot by using cloud-based technology. It's just applying for it. Now the truck, you see the now the Tesla coming up with this huge autopilot truck. It's gonna come out, and yeah, within 5 years, Chris, I can only imagine what type of products will there when my daughters, become like 20 years old. I don't know what kind of world will.
I'll tell you what, Justin, they'll look at you and they'll think you're a dinosaur. They'll think oh, dad doesn't know anything compared to, we all go through that, trust me. But
Yeah.
one of the things that I was real interested to hear you just talk about this, because the Illumina stuff is very interesting to me. I think,
Mhm.
but this is a kind of a supply chain transportation oriented uh,
Mhm.
podcast. So uh, the one thing I've noted is that the younger crowd, your
Mhm.
generation, and even younger that's coming out of schools. When I went to school, there was no logistics program, none.
Mm.
Our logistics program was go out and figure it out. That was our logistics program. And
Right,
now
right.
there are people like yourselves and even younger that are coming into the industry that have a book understanding of
Mhm.
logistics in general. Now, I
Right.
always think there's a big gap between trying to look at spreadsheets and actually figuring out what a company like Illumina or Samsung or anyone else is trying to develop and do. And you have to have that real world experience. But I've also been doing this a very, very long time. So I may be looking at that wrong. Where do
Mhm.
you, as I know you think you've been in it a long time, but where do you, as a younger person in this industry, see some of the main challenges?
Yeah. So right now, when I look at as my coworkers and my age groups, they're definitely started going to school for the supply chain basis. For example, MIT is offering now supply chain master's degree, and we're really wanting to learn more detail about what's really behind of the supply chain. And as you know that now there's so many what do you call certification courses you can take with the supply chain. APIX is one of them, is providing CSCP, Certified Supply Chain Professional certification. CPIM and all the type of stuff are out there, and really, you can actually learn and study and then get a degree out of it. So,
Right.
yeah, personally myself, I just took a few courses from, Harvard online, certification courses, but I'm also studying for the CSCP course because it seems like in my department everyone has that now, the CSCP or those type of certification, mastering in specific supply chain portion. So yeah, I mean definitely there's a lot of people spending time on studying, going to school, get a degree, and be more professional on the specific supply chain market. And Chris, as you know, there's so many things to learn. It's just not about delivering from point A to B. More and more I study about this, it's just crazy how much detail behind of the supply chain, and there's still a lot of things to learn.
It's funny because I talk to people outside the industry all the time. And, in the last couple of years, primarily because of the pandemic and supply issues with everything from toilet paper to bacon,
Exactly.
people have understood there's more about the supply chain going on than they ever thought. So I love that it's being exposed to an outside group. But I think the complexity of it is lost on most people. And I think you hit on that. And getting these certifications, learning more, and you've always been a very analytical person. I don't know anybody that manages a spreadsheet better than Justin Lim, but certainly not me. but the thing I go back to all the time is underneath all that is data management. It's
Exactly.
big data management. It's finding patterns. It's understanding from a transportation logistics standpoint, how do you get your component parts or your replacement parts or things like that to where they need to go in a most efficient, effective manner. And
Yeah.
the downfall of that has always been the modalities, the components, whether it's somebody on the ocean, like what's happening now when you see ships parked off every port in the world, just sitting there waiting for the next war
Right.
to break out or
Mhm.
pandemic to happen or whatever the case may be. And there's so much volatility involved that I wonder if we aren't going into more of a reactive stage in supply chain. We used to be very proactive. Everybody was Six Sigma or, using things like the Toyota way and things like that to understand efficiencies. And now it's like, I'm sure half your battle is, okay, we need it now. And we got to pay
Exactly.
whatever it takes to get it there.
Exactly. So that's great point, Chris. I mean, ever since pandemic, this whole supply chain and the constraint and this capacity issues has been really bad. So starting from 2020, as you can see, our revenue has been actually dropped. I think all other companies did, and because as I told you, we are mainly utilizing air capacity, and everyone stopped traveling starting from the pandemic.
Right.
So airline capacity has been dropped per IATA about 50% and more. So are they recovering? The short answer is not really for the international, because there's still this market is so volatile, and then there's all new type of variants coming up, and this is really impacting international travel. So whether what they're doing right now is the airline is not increasing international capacity, instead they're raising the rates to recover their loss back in the pandemic time.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we are doing whatever we can do to get it on the plane and then pay whatever the carrier is asking, and which is driving about 2 times more within 2 years. Our transportation spend has been increased about 2 times.
Well, the problem is there's no
So
ability to budget at all. And
exactly, it, air market, as you know, Chris, is we call it lobster price. You don't know how much is for tomorrow,
market.
and it's a market price. It's spot rate based. So
Yeah.
the contract here is no longer there. We don't even talk about contracted rate anymore. We talk about, hey, what's going to be the month to month base bidding type of stuff at this moment, and then still the rate is just even carrier doesn't know because it's really market driven and how airline is planning for the next couple months, and so it's just really tough situation.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I used to be able to say I could look at the crystal ball and kind of see the patterns over the last 20, 30 years and know that
Right.
certain things are going to happen. And that's all out the window. You know,
Mhm.
it just completely changes. And every time something volatile happens, it seems to roll all the way downhill. The bottom line is it goes to the consumer. All this supply chain stuff, which if you look
Mhm.
at inflation and the different categories that they measure that by, transportation is by far the worst part of that.
So and
And
the
I
fuel
don't
price
see it changing
nowadays.
soon.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
there's
what?
and then also inflation. And you made a good point. Inflation is all-time high since 2010. And then look at jet fuel now. It's skyrocketed. So I mean, it's all that is adding up to the transportation cost, and it's just really hard position here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but it obviously sounds like you've transitioned from the standard larger shipment type of scenario to the very volatile, very nimble kind of scenario you've had to deal with Illumina, right? And that's
Exactly.
great. That's great, and
Yeah.
I congratulate you on that. I actually want to. I'm putting together a small panel coming up in the next month or so, where I
Mm,
want to get 4 or 5 people,
mm,
again, younger people that are really looking to do some things in the industry, to
mm,
kind of have a Q&A. So I'd
mm.
love to invite you to that when I get a chance,
Oh yeah.
when we get a
Yeah.
chance,
Would love to be in.
because
Yeah.
I've always found you add to the dialogue real well.
Mm,
Um,
thank you.
you don't have the experience I do, but you've gotten baptism by fire, as the saying goes. So
Thanks, Chris.
uh,
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'll love to be in it. Send me over the invite, and yeah, that'll be a great discussion actually.
yeah, and the one of the things I'm trying to do with these type of podcasts is it's not new. Podcasts have been around for a while, but our industry in general has not exposed itself well. And not that I'm the greatest voice in the world or person to look at in the world on these podcasts for this information, but I think the more that we go about doing this kind of thing, the more people become interested in this business, and the
Right.
better we can do with moving the ball forward. Because as it is, we tend to just throw money at things. The government does that, industries do that, your company, my company, we all do that when things get volatile, and we've got to come up with a better way to handle this stuff.
Exactly. And Chris, now, like shippers like us, we need to have some visibility how other shippers are paying for the transportation. So now, if you think about it, there's just so many tools out there, and then also vendors like system. Like now, it's all about the system and the apps, right? And then this one of the vendor we use provides the visibility on how airline is charging to 3PL or the carriers, and how much is carrier shippers are paying. So we have that month by month data visibility of what is the market rate and how the shippers are paying. So, I mean, those tools as a shipper perspective is really helps to make sure that we are not overpaying for certain lanes because we're dealing with so many different lanes. And
Yeah.
it's all about the database, nowadays.
Absolutely, and it gives you
Yeah,
benchmarks to work off of. And of course,
exactly.
if you find out that you're way under that mark, I'm sure you don't say anything at all. You just take it and get as much freight
You
moving as
know,
possible. So, no, that's fantastic.
yeah.
Well, I know this was kind of a brief conversation, but it's very much appreciated. And again, I wanted just to give some people a feel for another part of the logistics industry that a lot of people don't think about. And the fact is that it takes a lot of links in the supply chain to get things where they're going, where they belong, and to continue to make them work for all of us. Because all of
Right.
it runs downhill. If people aren't able to, just using Illumina's example, if if the governments all over the world weren't able to properly sequence
Mhm.
these different contagions that get out there, then there's no way to develop vaccines for them. So it, you are in, that's an important element to our society in general, but everybody kind of backs up and doesn't look at the supply chain side of that with any kind of focus, and that's
Exactly.
part of our is to give it that focus.
Exactly. We have a lot of we have a lot of responsibility to make sure that to happen by delivering, and then, to make sure we're running the business in all worldwide. So, yeah, a lot of eyes on it and a lot of
Yeah.
expectation on it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, again, thank you, Justin, very much for taking a few minutes. Very much appreciated. And I hope to have you on again real soon.
all right, sounds good, Chris. Thank you.
Hey, Justin, thanks again for coming on with us for a few minutes. It was a pleasure to have you and get your insights into Illumina, the supply chain challenges that you have and that the industry in general has going forward as it's blossoming into a giant, giant industry, of course. And I think a lot of people don't recognize the complexity of supply chain in general in all these different industries. And having you on to talk a little bit about that was fantastic. We hope to have you again very, very soon. It's much appreciated. Hey, everybody, come see us on iLevelLogistics.com, where you can see this video. You can see our curated and aggregated information on a daily basis. As a matter of fact, sign up for the email. It'll come right to your inbox. You can see brief little snippets about the industry and about a lot of different things that may or may not be important to you for that given day. And that's the idea, to give you short little bites of information so that you can go about your day and learn and grow more in the industry that you belong to. Those outside of the industry as well are welcome, of course, because that's what it's about. It's about growing the community. It's about making this conversation about supply chain and logistics transportation industry larger, because it is important to everyone out there. So again, join us. We'll see you again soon on the next edition of Jaws Bites.